What's going on, everybody? I'm Nick Whalen. He is Joe Bartel. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, Wednesday edition, off-season edition, getting close to the NFL Draft edition. Joe, a lot to get to today. But before we get into some of the players we are targeting, players we're avoiding at current Bestball ADPs, we are brought to you by Ultra GM. Have you ever dreamed of managing your favorite pro football team? Of course you have if you're listening to this. Do you watch your team and think the GM got it wrong? As a Jaguars fan, yes, I do. Do you think you could do better? Here's your chance to prove it. Introducing Ultra GM, a revolutionary new take on fantasy football that makes you the general manager of your favorite team. Start with the team's full roster, build it through the draft, free agency, trades, and even the practice squad to create your ideal team. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided the degree of realism and engagement that Ultra GM offers, and none has ever given you the opportunity to manage the team that you love and care for most. Compete against family, friends, and even your team's real GM to use the Ultra GM. You think you can do better than your team's GM? Well, check it out. Visit ultragm.com to prove it. Joe Bartel, could you do a better job than Brian Gutekunst is doing managing the Green Bay Packers?
Ooh, Goody? Maybe. I would have been far more aggressive. I don't know if
The bar's
that's
a little bit higher for your team than my team.
Yeah, I was going to say there's absolutely at least 3 or 4 GMs that I know I could be better than. I feel very confident saying that you could do the same thing too, having watched you manage your teams in college football and probably in Madden as well too. No, I think that it was unfortunate for the Giants fans, but the HBO Hard Knocks with Joe Shane and company, I love that. It was very illuminating. I love that far more than the other HBO Hard Knocks variations of it for football stuff. But the problem was I realized, wow, they talk very similar and think very similar to what I would. And that's not good because this is supposed to be somebody that's getting, paid millions and millions of dollars to analyze football the same way that it feels like a lot of other smart people in the fantasy community, other outside areas do the same thing. So, yeah, no, I actually feel very confident that from a personnel perspective, I could do the same thing.
All right, Joe. So, theme of today's show, we're taking a look at updated Underdog ADPs. We're choosing players that we like at those ADPs, players that we don't like. I know you're a little bit under the weather. Both of us are busy, so we'll try to keep this as concise as we can. Where do you want to start here? Do you want to go with guys you like or guys you don't like?
Yeah, I think it'll be easier with guys that I like. Now we're just beginning of April, 3 weeks away from the NFL draft is wild to say. I felt like I was planning out my schedule for the rest of the month, and actually RotoWire is going to be live at the NFL draft. We got media credentials for it. I can't wait to really do a lot of the awesome coverage we're going to do there in the next 3 weeks. But I'm planning. I'm like, wow, this is way closer than I thought. So it's still 3 weeks away. We don't know where a lot of these rookies are going. We're doing this on Underdog, which is primarily wide receiver heavy based best ball in relation to a few of the other ones out there competing wise. And I think that is important context for a number of reasons. So players that we like are probably going to end up being running backs, or at least a lot of mine tend to be, because I think when it comes to the August and redraft ADP, a lot of these guys, and it was the same for Josh Jacobs, who you and I pounded the table on, or at least I did months and months and months before actual redraft last year. His Underdog ADP was 5th round. His ESPN ADP was like late 2nd, early 3rd round. That's probably going to be representative of what you see in your redraft leagues come this August. But still, it's a good conversation to have to be mindful of these guys that we like a lot. So I think we start out with the guys that I'm targeting at least right now based off of Underdog Best Ball ADP.
Okay, and to be clear, before we get into this, I am pulling ADP figures that started on March 24th and run through drafts happening today, Wednesday, April 2nd. So a little over a week's worth of data. You can go further back. You can condense it a little bit if you want, but numbers should be pretty similar. I will tell you, Joe, that I for the most part, stayed away from rookies. Obviously, this is more of a running back than a receiver class. There's still 3, 4, 5 receivers that we'll need to account for, but I want to see landing spots, before I make a decision one way or the other. I mean, that to me matters more almost than the skill set right now, but I know you have some rookies on your list, but we'll start with Chuba Hubbard. Definitely not a rookie, a guy who got an extension as a veteran last year toward the end of the season for the Carolina Panthers. Similar in some ways to what we saw with Alvin Kamara, getting that extension, Hubbard a little bit younger. I love Chuba Hubbard. I like the direction that this Panthers team is trending for the first time in a while.
Exactly.
I was talking with John McKechnie on the XM show earlier this week. He was already floating out there, the over on 6.5 wins for the Carolina Panthers. So first of all, tell us where Chuba Hubbard is going and what attracts you to him at that price.
Yeah, it's ironic you mentioned Alvin Kamara. In the one best ball draft that I've done thus far, they actually went together at the 5-3 and 5-4, so early
Mhm.
fifth round spot. Running backs taken before him, because I always think this matters contextually.
Yeah.
Amari Hampton, who conventionally seems to be the second running back draft right now. Again, you had said we don't know the draft spot, but fine. Hampton, if he is a first round value, would probably be a little bit higher, depending on what team he goes to. Joe Mixon went a little bit before him, and then James Cook, Breece Hall, and then Chase Brown, Kyron Williams. Those were all third round running backs. You think within 24 picks, you're talking about Chuba Hubbard being in the same spot as Chase Brown. And I've mentioned on past podcasts, at least from a dynasty value, I'd be more interested in trading away Chase Brown than I would be in certain spots. You outlined it perfectly. Chuba Hubbard signed an extension. There's no Jonathan Brooks theoretically all year, right? He tore his ACL very late last season. You'd assume Jonathan Brooks does not come back. And at that point, the Panthers may have already punted on his draft value.
Yep.
You burn the second round pick. That's just what it's going to be. You probably shouldn't have drafted a running back coming off an ACL injury anyway, as the first running back drafted. And then to replace Miles Sanders, who really was a nothing burger in my mind, with Rico Dowdle, that's also a nothing burger in my mind. It's just some sort of depth for a guy that had over 1,000 yards or close to it. Not very efficient, not very good. He's a clear backup in my mind. Chuba Hubbard was right around running back 10 or 12 last season, certainly was even higher before he got injured right at the end there. The Panthers offense is going to be better. I think post benching Bryce Young has proven to be at least a middling quarterback, and whether it be Adam Thielen or another step up for Xavier Legette in year 2 for him, Jalen Coker, same thing. Like, this offense is going to be in a good spot. The division is very bad. I think Chuba Hubbard absolutely should be in like a fourth round conversation. And now, again, mentioning the running backs, like, I like Amari and Hampton as much as most people do. I like Joe Mixon a decent amount. So maybe it's not I'm taking Chuba Hubbard over those running backs, but it's that Chuba Hubbard needs to be considered in a third, fourth round range. And currently he's not. I think this is going to be a theme for me, at least in best balls right now, is I will happily wait on my running back too, because this is another year.
Yeah.
Wasn't so much last year, but the year before that, where my running back two is absolutely coming in round 5 or later, whether it be these rookies that I like quite a bit because this draft class is amazing. We talked about that before, or it's going to be in a Kamara, an Aaron Jones, a Chuba Hubbard if it falls to that point, because those guys are tremendous values at the moment.
You know, Joe, the one big pushback I would have here is, how much does Raheem Blackshear worry you as the third running back there?
Little, for those who are listening along. Nick says it with a smirk in his face. Yes, I would imagine that any pass catcher, and again, I want to be clear, just because the Panthers drafted Jonathan Brooks in round 2 and that they signed Rico Dowdle does not mean that they could not add an additional pass catching running back or somebody else in that backfield. Like, if you are a team that's just trying to get better, right? Panthers have been one of the worst teams in the past 3 seasons. If you're getting better, just getting more good players in the building never hurts. So if there are 14 plus running backs that in a different year would be late day 2 picks that might fall further, that the Panthers draft and add someone early on in day 3 does not make a difference at all to me. So yes, Jamie in the chat, Nick mentioning Blackshear as well too. I think they could add another person to that backfield personnel wise, and it'll make zero difference to me for Chuba Hubbard.
Love Chuba Hubbard. Profited greatly off of Chuba Hubbard last year. My one hesitation though is like, last year, like, where was Chuba Hubbard going? I mean, you were getting such a good
10th
deal.
round.
Yeah, right. 10th round. So, a guy you could get and pick 115 or whatever. And I think it's a lot easier, obviously, to be profitable in that spot than it is when you might have to burn the 50th overall pick on him. But, he's rising for good reason. I think we feel better about the Panthers. They invested more in the offensive line. So that is a good call. I would have put him on my list if he was not on yours. I went pretty pass catcher heavy with the guys that I'm in on, but I do want to circle back and mention Joe Mixon, because I think we're at an interesting point with him where I think coming into this past year, maybe even going into 2023, there was already some, all right, maybe this is the year we fade Joe Mixon. He's not that old, but he came in young. He's had a lot of workload. And, first half of last season, he was great. Got a little bit banged up, started to tail off a bit toward the end. Is he somebody that you would reinvest in, given, we have a ton more changes now, once again, to this Houston offense, from the offensive line on down?
Yeah, the last 2 years when Joe Mixon was a Bengal, I was saying at that point, I'm nervous. I don't want to go ahead and go that direction, especially as a fourth round running back. Yeah, the volume's going to be there, but what is the upside scenario? And I thought that felt similar to the Texans. It was a little bit different because there's a different change of scenario. I thought actually the offense could be better. It wasn't, because CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick, obviously that marriage didn't work after a second year, but Mixon himself was fine and profitable. There is going to be a point where the wheels fall off, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Texans do end up drafting a running back early as well. Dameon Pierce is not a quality backup in my mind. I know that might upset some of the dynasty community, but I'm thoroughly convinced Dameon Pierce is not a thing. If the Texans were to draft just Caleb Johnson or Bashal Tutin, the fastest 40-yard dash runner from this running back class, and there is a third-round pick attached to it, I think Joe Mixon's value falls a little bit, even though it probably isn't warranted. And the contract, I believe, is set up where Mixon is effectively on a one-year deal here for the Texans, and probably rightfully so. So there's probably a point later in draft season where Joe Mixon's value feels more comfortable for me, especially in these best ball formats that really are prioritizing receivers. It might just happen naturally as people get more excited about the receivers and we see this best ball win sort of push these guys at the moment where Joe Mixon's a mid to early fourth round pick. I'm fine with that. If I liked a roster build where I didn't want to have a running back 2 round 5 and later, which I don't want to do, but let's just play it out. Mixon would be completely fine in my mind. I just think he might fall even a bit further yet.
So you'd go Hubbard over Mixon.
Yep.
To be clear. Okay. I'm with you on that. All right. I'm going to throw out Rashee Rice, Joe. I am a Rashee Rice sympathizer. I think that was a huge part of the reason that this Chiefs offense looked the way it did for most of last season. I think we kind of got into a habit, I guess, of just looking at the Chiefs and saying, man, when is it going to be fixed? What's the problem here? Well, not only were you without Rashee Rice for virtually the entire season, you didn't have Hollywood Brown until the end of the year. There is going to be probably even more of a drop off for Travis Kelce. So I'm not saying that we're back to the 2019 Chiefs all of a sudden next season, but I think Rashee Rice is that good. I get the concerns with the severity of the injury. We're talking about about as severe as it gets for a knee injury. We've seen guys take a little bit longer to come back, but the injury happened early enough in the season. Medical technology has advanced to the point where this is not usually a 12-month injury. So I would be surprised, at least the way I evaluate Rashee Rice right now, if he's not out there to begin the year. Of course, there is still, I suppose, the legal stuff hanging over him. We haven't really heard anything about that in forever. And I think that is part of it. That's part of the discount that you're getting. But he's the wide receiver 26 over essentially the last 10 or 11 days, if you look at Underdog ADP. So that puts him behind guys like Xavier Worthy, Devontae Smith, Jamison Williams, Zay Flowers, essentially the exact same ADP as Rome Odunze. I'm certainly willing to take Rice over Rome Odunze. And I would be pretty surprised, barring a negative medical update, barring a 4-game suspension to begin the year. I think we're going to see Rice rise and rise and rise, much like he did prior to week 1 last year.
Yeah. Well, and last year was more predicated on the legal aspect as well, too. Like Rice at one point was a 7th or 8th round pick because you thought for sure he's going to get suspended for 8+ games. And that never happened. That we assumed he was going to get suspended 8+ games is the part that I'm concerned about now, because that was the wide conventional process, was that Rice is going to be out X duration of time. Never occurred. Well, then it's going to happen at some point. Like the legal system will eventually make that play out. We saw it with Alvin Kamara. It ended up being 2+ years after the event actually occurred, where he got suspended for a little bit, and that might be the bigger deal. Right? Yeah, right. I think it got appealed down. But even when the first part of it got announced, you were surprised, given that the assumption was it would be much longer. And that's probably the best case scenario for Rice. I think the key part is the players that are around him in ADP. So you mentioned, I just want to reiterate, Devonta Smith or Rashee Rice. When it's Devonta Smith playing a full 17 games, you assume Rice either won't be effective if he is playing or miss some due to suspension. I might lean towards Devonta Smith there. Zay Flowers, probably a similar spot, because I like Zay Flowers a lot for that Ravens offense, and they were obviously really good. Jamison Williams, I don't get that one at all. I don't know if I actually listed him on the players that I'm surprised on. You always want the boom weeks in best ball. I get it, but I want nothing to do with Jamison Williams at his ADP. In his recent draft, I took Marvin Harrison over Rashee Rice, and maybe that's the wrong idea, but you had outlined really clearly why the Chiefs offense wasn't great last year, but there was multiple pieces missing, and Xavier Worthy really came on at the end of the last season. I would rather have the number 1 target, theoretically, in Marvin Harrison, that offense, as opposed to Rice, who is going to be the best target, but not used the same way. So Odunze, I like Odunze a lot. He was one of my favorite draft guys last year. I think in this offense he gets better. I'll take Rice over Odunze, but it's that next tier. Rice over DK Metcalf, Rice over Cortland Sutton, Rice over Ted McMillan, who now might not even be the first receiver drafted upcoming. Jordan Addison, Chris Olave, who I like, we'll get to him in a second. I mean, it's a very clear line of demarcation in my mind. So Rice is his value at the moment, late 4th round pick, above a lot of these other receivers like Ted McMillan, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf. That makes complete sense to me. I'm just not pushing him much higher unless we get certainty that A, he is going to be completely healthy, which we can't, or B, the more important part in my mind, that there is going to be no legal ramifications from last summer.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, Andy Reid did say this week that Rashee Rice is on track, medically speaking, for training camp. So we seem to be in a good spot there. But yeah, the legal stuff, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being an optimist here, but I always thought the like 6, 7, 8 game suspension was just way too much. That's just usually not how it plays out. Like on balance, these suspensions tend to be much less than you expect. The public outrage has also wildly subsided compared to where it was at that time. I think that actually benefits the players the further away you get from the incident. I mean, there are people out there who have probably forgotten that even happened, honestly. Whereas at the time, everybody's clamoring for some sort of big suspension. So I
don't want to interrupt you necessarily, but last year around, I mean, it wasn't around this time, but it was maybe like a month or two later, you had liked Cooper Kupp as like a late 3rd round pick. I mean, that was one of your guys we talked about quite a bit. That's the same scenario. But the difference is Cooper Kupp was at the tail end of his career very clearly. So, of course, gets cut by the Rams. Puka Nacua came on. There is no Puka Nacua for the Chiefs offense. As much as you can like Xavier Worthy, as much as you can say Travis Kelce, there is no Puka Nacua for the Chiefs. And also Rashee Rice, when healthy, was very clearly and obviously the number one target for that Patrick Mahomes offense. So, like, your idea for Cooper Kupp last year, I totally bought into by the end of the draft season. That really applies even more so this year for Rashee Rice.
Yeah. Well, it looked good for 1 week when Cooper Kupp put up 32 fantasy points in week 1 and then immediately got hurt. All right, let's move on to the next player on your list. An interesting one, Joe. I'm glad we can have this discussion. Chris Olave.
Yeah. Okay. So I had said Marvin Harrison over Rashee Rice. So maybe that draws some eyebrows for the people listening. I understand Marvin Harrison was really disappointing in his rookie season. I am not at all in on the Cardinals offense. In fact, we didn't really include him in the guys I wanted to trade away, but I would sooner trade away Kyler Murray than be trying to acquire more shares of the Cardinals. I'm very nervous about how there really hasn't been a leap up. It's not like a Madden or college football progression where it's like, all right, +5 overall because they had another year. They're older. I know it doesn't work that way in the NFL, but where is the jump in prospect improvement for these guys when you haven't seen that for Kyler Murray, I think, and Marvin Harrison. But Marvin Harrison is the clear and operative number one person in offense. You're getting that same exact concept applied a round plus later in Chris Olave. Yeah, he's got a ton of concussion problems. I mean, obviously very concerning. If Chris Olave suffers one more concussion, is he done for his career? I don't know. I don't want to ever say that, but like that has to be on people's minds at this point. That being said, the Saints can't do anything cap-wise to really change that offense. It was bring back Derek Carr. They will draft at least one guy. There's been rumors about the Saints drafting or trading for Jackson Dart as well, too. I've been reading more. Like they might add and find their new quarterback to be this upcoming draft. Olave is going to be the number one target. And when he has been the number one target, he was going as like a mid-second, early 3rd round pick just this last year before these injuries kind of piled up. Now we're saying we get the same exact scenario, but a 3-round discount. I get it. Olave could get hurt. In best ball, doesn't matter. In redraft, it's a different conversation, but in best ball, fine, you're missing Olave, whatever, not a big deal. You're going to probably have 3 or 4 or 5 other receivers, and when you're doing these underdog ones in particular, you're probably drafting 7 anyway. I think Chris Olave clearly is the number one target for an offense that didn't change, already has been ADP as like a 20th to 24th overall pick in years past. Makes complete sense in my mind, and I'm absolutely slamming that selection if I can get it at the mid-5th round. I would probably do it in that same range, and again, we're talking about Rashee Rice as a late 4th round pick, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers. That's where Olave should be. Olave should be drafted over Xavier Worthy, over Jameson Williams, and yet we're getting him now 12, 14, 16 plus picks later. Makes zero sense in my mind, and obviously that's the complete injury discount being built into his player profile.
Yeah, I actually think the discount is pretty appropriate. The upside versus downside calculation, it's like you don't have to take him with pick 35. He's also not sitting there at pick 95. I think the ADP zone to me makes sense. He's right between Jordan Addison and Chris Godwin, but I mean, I think we are in the Tua zone, by the way, when it comes to the concussions. And, you just picture the type of balls that Chris Olave catches. Like he's getting hit like that for a reason because he's always running over the middle and whatnot. I'm also just kind of out on the Saints team in general. I don't think Derek Carr wants to be there. I think they've been pushing this rebuild for like 7 years and things are finally coming to roost. So it's like the difference between the risk with Olave and the risk for Rashee Rice, two very different risks, but, both at risk of missing some X number of games throughout the year. I think the best case upside scenario for Rashee Rice is a lot higher than Chris Olave's. Like even if Chris Olave plays every game, I don't know that I view him within this Saints offense with the same level of upside that I would have in years past. Like I think it's kind of over for this team, or at least the current iteration of it.
That's fair context. And I think the Rashee Rice part of things, you can see a very clear upside for a similar draft range to Olave, and there's more downside for Olave. Although, again, we're not necessarily factoring the legal ramifications and what that would equal to Olave possibly missing time. Let's do this the other way. Now, this is more of an exercise for the listeners as well too. The 3 worst teams in the NFL this year were the Titans, or the Browns, and then I guess the Giants were the number 3 overall draft pick. Calvin Ridley at a 7th or 8th round ADP was probably fine. In best ball wasn't necessarily winning games. Maybe he was in your lap a few times, but if you played him, Calvin Ridley, in redraft, you got more or less what you're looking for as a 7th or 8th round receiver. Jerry Jeudy emerged and erupted later on in the season as a quality fantasy receiver. And then obviously we all know what Malik Neighbors does. These were the 3 worst teams in the NFL. So you can talk about the Saints being a bad team and kind of coming to the end of whatever this extended window was supposed to be post Drew Brees. And yet I can still say, well, in today's NFL, especially in a dome against the NFC South, Olave is going to be primed for 1,100 receiving yards, even if the Saints end up winning 4 games.
No, you're right. You're right. Being on a bad team doesn't just mean that, there are numbers to be had for every bad team. And I think you're right about that. I just don't think the upside is as high as it was. But again, I think the discount is appropriate. I'm going to throw out Jajuan Jennings here, Joe, and we might be going head to head on this one. I know you are. I know you're kind of out on both he and Ricky Pearsall, but I look at the acquisition cost right now. You got to take him around pick 65 or so, wide receiver 35, 36, depending on where you look. So he goes just after Deebo Samuel. He goes right around the same spot as Jerry Jeudy, just ahead of George Pickens, just ahead of Jayden Reed. As I read those off, that does feel a little rich, but I love the player. I don't trust Brandon Ayuk. I don't know that the Niners are going to end up trading him. I just don't think there's a realistic return out there that would really make sense. But even if Ayuk remains on this team, I don't know if he's going to be the same guy. I don't know if he wants to be there. I don't know if I trust him to stay healthy. So I think there will be opportunity for Jennings, but I know your counter to this is having Christian McCaffrey back and how that changes this offense.
Completely. So Deebo Samuel is the only move that we know has happened right now, right? Like we could project Brandon Ayuk as possibly being traded. I believe his contract is guaranteed either today or if it was yesterday, it's really soon. Like if there was going to be a Brandon Ayuk trade, you'd assume it would have happened over the next 24 to 48 hours. That he is still on the roster makes complete sense in my mind. The Niners signed Ayuk to an extension and really kind of fought a public battle that I think directly hurt the morale of the team, especially with Trent Williams as well too. Not to just give up on that after 9 months. Like I think you're going to keep Brandon Ayuk at least to see that through and what it would be for at least a year plus. So I'm assuming Ayuk is on that team. I'm assuming obviously no Deebo Samuel, but the return of Christian McCaffrey matters too. Like I'm more out on Ricky Pearsall than I am Jajuan Jennings. But if we're just trying to be the projection bros here and be like, oh, well, look at what Jajuan Jennings did all of last season, it's a completely different offense. It's like, this banana tastes like an apple. No, it tastes like a banana. This is a completely different scenario from what we saw all of last season. So that Brock Purdy likes Jajuan Jennings matters a ton to me. That Jajuan Jennings was the featured guy when everyone was injured matters a lot. That could theoretically happen as well because Ayuk obviously has injury concerns. Christian McCaffrey does. George Kittle does as well too. But as things stand entering the season, we're talking about Jajuan Jennings as target 3 on that team, maybe 4, depending on what you think of Ricky Pearsall and how he gets affected to that offense as well too. And it's not as if we're talking about Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, Packers scenario. Like, yeah, he's the number 1 receiver for that team. McCaffrey is going to generate at least 70, 80 receptions. George Kittle is a factor on multiple different weeks, depending what the scheme looks like. You want to run the ball more. We saw that the Niners trade away Jordan Mason. They are going to draft somebody. They have like 15 third-round picks. It's not quite. That's an exaggeration. But they have a lot of other third-round picks to get one of these running backs. This offense is going to look way different than it did last year, and that is going to be the detriment of both Jajuan Jennings, but I think also Ricky Pearsall, who is going about a round later than Jajuan Jennings. Like I get Pearsall ended the season really well. I liked him a decent amount, and I think he actually makes a lot of sense in that Niners offense, but Ayuk needs to be gone. And I think you probably have to have less of a Christian McCaffrey emphasis as well to make good on both those guys in their current ADP.
All fair. all fair. I mean, I would point out, I think Jennings was still productive even when McCaffrey was on the field toward the end of last season. But obviously, Ayuk was out of the mix. So maybe you need one of those two things to happen. Maybe that's what you're saying, right? Is either Ayuk can't be out there or Christian McCaffrey can't. And I think it's also worth noting that Christian McCaffrey is no guarantee to play 16 or 17 games. So I think that is part of the calculation as well. It depends on your faith in some ways in Brock Purdy. I do want to bring up a name real quick. I'm going off the board here, but a name that just jumped out to me based on the ADP. I was so ready to put this guy on my fades list, but he's going so late that I don't even know if I could justify it. Michael Pittman, man. Like anybody who took Michael Pittman in the third round or maybe even in the early fourth by the end of draft season last year instantly regretted that. It never got better at any point throughout the season. He's going outside the top 100 now.
Yeah, and he's going to be the number one target for that offense. He obviously was dealing with a legitimate back. There was legitimate injury to his back where his spine, I think, had a fracture in there, and he was still playing through it. Like that, I don't know. The NFL players are so crazy with the stuff that they choose to do, because it's like that conversation we had with Baker Mayfield last season with the Browns. Well, he plays through all these injuries, then doesn't perform as well, and then everyone gets low on Baker Mayfield, gets cut, and Browns are still searching for what they want at quarterback. Obviously, Baker has kind of reemerged himself, but whatever. Yeah, I assume it's Daniel Jones that's going to win win the quarterback job for the Colts. I think everything is set up for Anthony Richardson to fail from the coaching staff's perspective. I would assume Daniel Jones is going to be the week one starter. And if that's the case, that is the offense that I want nothing to do with. You had said about the Saints, and maybe my own analysis needs to kind of play out for the Colts offense too. Daniel Jones is not a top 32 quarterback in the league. Not anywhere close in my mind. He certainly isn't going to have the rapport with Michael Pittman that I would assume a best case scenario offense for Daniel Jones would look like. And while I believe Jonathan Taylor is a one-of-one talent and he's going to be awesome, I would sooner assume it's going to be another Alec Pierce scenario where you would rather have him in best ball, because if he catches 2 for 62 in a touchdown, he probably makes your starting lineup as a wide receiver 3 or 4 in best ball format. So I don't know if there's a scenario I'm really touching Michael Pittman other than as a wide receiver 5 if I'm drafting both Olave and Rashee Rice. And in that scenario, if the worst case scenarios happen for both, then I have Michael Pittman sort of buoying things. It's not great, but yeah, that's one of those that probably is a stay away as well for me too.
Yeah, I was going to ask how much that impacted your Jonathan Taylor evaluation. So I'll give you an either or here based on some close ADPs. Jonathan Taylor or Bucky Irving?
I've went back and forth on that. I've been at least partially aware of what the RotoWire projections are entering the season, and a lot of discourse has been revolving around Bucky Irving, and I've been a little bit lower on Bucky Irving than people already were at various points last year. He's clearly the number one back for the Buccaneers, and they utilize him great. Whether Rachaad White is there or not, we mentioned him a couple podcasts ago as a trade candidate, matters little to me. I think Sean Tucker just will take over more of that workload. And if the Buccaneers are smart, Sean Tucker is like a 1B to Bucky Irving's 1A. It's not, here's Bucky Irving's the guy. In a full point PPR setting, like Underdog is, and with the amount of receptions I believe Bucky will get, I'm taking Bucky Irving in that scenario. Even though Jonathan Taylor was great at the end of last season, I'm taking Bucky Irving, and I think he will very confidently be a guy that's a staple in your lineup.
All right, let's talk a little Jayden Higgins real quick, Joe. I know you are high on Jayden Higgins coming out of Iowa State. Talk a little bit about how much landing spot matters, where he's going right now, what appeals to you about him.
Yeah, so the conventional thought process, and again, you can listen to Mario and John, who did the podcast directly after us later in the week, who do a much better job covering the prospects than I ever will. I will continue and always embrace that we are pupils of John and Mario. They do a fantastic job with the prospect stuff. In my mind, it's very clearly going to be Matthew Golden as one of the receivers drafted in the first round, then Ted McMillan as another receiver drafted in the first round. There are other slot receiver archetypes. I don't like Luther Burden. I guess that's maybe a surprise to some folks. I'm not a huge Luther Burden guy. Emeka Egbuka as well for Ohio State, like him a lot more. There's the Royals kid as well too, who I don't think is a first-round talent, but there's at least an archetype of slot receiver. What we're seeing right now, at least I think over the past 2 years, is there's very little archetype of a outside receiver. And there wasn't that available in free agency as well, too. Like Devonta Adams went to a certain landing spot. You saw Stephon Diggs eventually find a place with the Patriots. But for a team that wants like a speed X receiver on the outside, there has not been that for multiple seasons now. Like you just have not been able to find that very often. Brian Thomas fell and probably surprisingly so. But that's like the one shining example right now of what we've had of that archetype of receiver. So I think Higgins is going to get pushed up. Now, there's been a lot of teams that need receivers. My Packers, for example, that have been in on him since the Senior Bowl. And I think there are teams that you see draft at the back end of the first round that like to target Senior Bowl receivers that also matter a lot in context for this too. So I'm assuming Jayden Higgins, I'm going to say is a top 36 to 38 receivers. That allows 32, right? 1 through 32. So first round and the next 6 picks into the second round. If you're to put it in that context, looking at the history of receivers that get drafted in that range, Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall just last season were both in that mix and in that range, and they were drafted about the same spot. So receiver 65 in best ball right now and 142 in total ADP. That is Jayden Higgins' range at the moment. Say whatever you want about the player itself. I'm just looking at value right now, early April. Jayden Higgins is going to be in best ball a little higher than that because there's going to be a push from the NFL to make a spot for Jayden Higgins. He is going to be drafted in that sort of range. And there's going to be a push for drafters who just go off the hype of the draft. So if we're saying who today is going to be drafted higher in a month, there's probably a number of different running backs. I understand you not wanting to talk or to necessarily call them out, whether it be Hampton or things like that. But I think Jayden Higgins is the very clear and most obvious example consequentially of these receivers. You can talk about Royals or some of these other guys that drafted like early fourth round that will get their ADP jump by 30 points because nobody expected them to even be drafted at all. But Higgins is going to have a spot and going to be kind of projected, I think, right away to be a difference maker for any offense that drafts him.
Let's talk a little Travis Hunter, Joe. I don't think we need to say any more on Pearsall or Jajuan Jennings. I know you're fading both of those. I already talked about Alvin Kamara. But Travis Hunter is a fade for you. He's a fade for me as well. I mean, I think this is almost an unprecedented situation, right? Where we have a guy who he could play receiver. We don't know how much receiver he's going to play. I have a hard time believing he's going to be anything close to a full-time guy on both sides of the ball. I would love to see it. I'm in full support of trying it out. I just don't think there's a reason that there's virtually no precedent for this, right? We've seen guys play both ways, but it's usually specialized packages, right? You're not out there for 65 snaps on both sides of the ball. Travis Hunter's going inside the top 100. His ADP has fallen quite a bit just in the last week or two, but still going around pick 94, 95 on average. So if we are looking at him as a receiver specifically, that means he's going about 10 picks after Cooper Kupp. He's going a little bit after Josh Downs, right in the same range as guys like Darnell Mooney and Jalen McMillan.
There's a few landing spots where if Travis Hunter goes to the Patriots, for example, I think he actually is more receiver than cornerback. And in that regard, if you're to do this sort of best ball draft, Nick is like, I'm not sure about this. If you're do the best ball sort of build, that actually is the perfect boom. I entered a $3 competition. All right, Travis Hunter actually gets drafted with the Giants and he's more of a cornerback. Oh, well, I missed my wide receiver 5 in that instance. But in this scenario where he goes to the Patriots, for example, and we can just play this out with the Patriots. There's probably a few other teams that fit this bill. And he ends up being the number one receiver or a receiver for that team. And consequentially so, there's dramatic payoff. I just am so risk averse in a lot of these different ways. And more confidently, I can build teams without relying on a boom bust round 9 receiver to help me get there, that I will confidently just avoid this scenario because there's far more bust than boom potential. Every other scout that you hear says Travis Hunter is going to be possibly a Pro Bowl or Hall of Fame level cornerback. That from a secondary perspective, Travis Hunter is that good. He could be that same thing for receiver, but most people, just from what you're hearing right now on the outside, would say Travis Hunter is a better corner than receiver. It might be Travis Hunter is a 9.5 corner and Travis Hunter is a 8.7 receiver. Not much of a difference, but enough of a difference to say, if you're going to invest in this one thing, you want this top 5 pick to be something, it's going to be corner. They get paid relatively the same. Travis Hunter might actually be able to change a complete market thing in 5 years if he is an Ohtani and does both these things exceptionally well. There's a lot of things that have to happen along the way for that to occur, though. So I'm assuming Travis Hunter is more often than not going to be drafted as a corner. And if he plays 20 snaps as a receiver, you're not getting enough as a wide receiver 50 top 100 pick to be able to play that out in a better spot. You're gambling that he goes to maybe 3 of the 4 landing spots that make sense. And I just don't want to do that right now.
Well, I think you could argue as well that just in the last week, New England has become a little bit less appealing because they did bring in Stephon Diggs. Like not that we love Stephon Diggs at this point in his career necessarily, but that receiver room all of a sudden is not as barren as it was.
Sure. And there's part of it too with the Patriots where I think you're looking for some positive publicity. Mike Vrabel is going to be a great head coach. Like I think very, very comfortably the Patriots are going to be one of those teams. I don't know if you and John McKechnie and Jeff talked about that in Sirius XM. I would very sneakily take their over on their win total if that's the case, because I think Mike Vrabel just does a really good job with lesser talent. And Drake May is a consequentially better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill ever was already at this point. So I think if you're the Patriots, you want to build in some positive momentum. Vrabel gives you that aspect. Stephon Diggs is a positive signing in my mind, especially the way they structure that contract. Travis Hunter as the receiver is probably the most eyeballs the Patriots have had on that franchise since Tom Brady. Right away, that move consequentially would do that. Not that Elliott Wolf, who's the de facto general manager for the Patriots, cares about that. He's from the Packers system. They normally don't really care. You might be kind of told by other people that matter in the organization to make Travis Hunter be the biggest star on the Patriots because they need one, that there's just been a void for that. So I get what you're saying. And I mean, like he could do that for the Giants. All that analysis I just gave the Patriots could apply to the Giants as well too. But the idea of Travis Hunter and Malik Neighbors somehow trying to share the orbit of pass catching opportunities in that offense, it makes me very hesitant. The Giants also invest in their secondary a little bit too, so maybe they don't want to have that scenario. And if Travis Hunter truly wants to be the scenario breaker where he is going to try to do this, there are certain teams that might just not want that sort of emphasis and TV attention on a player that is doing that, and it will be off the board. So even like there are 32 teams, maybe there are 5 that think Travis Hunter is a better receiver than corner. There might be one of those that's scared off that he wants to do both. That's already a significant percentage of teams that would put him in a spot fantasy-wise to make a difference. So it's a really, really fascinating question dynasty-wise. I know Alan Slazowski's done a great job doing that with his guests over the past couple of weeks on other shows. Mm-hmm. But in best ball for this year, I really want nothing to do with a under 100 overall drafted Travis Hunter.
All right, I'll give you a couple Cardinals, Joe. We already talked a little bit about Kyler Murray. Just not in this year. I don't like drafting quarterbacks in that range in general. If I'm not paying up for one of the true elites, I'm not taking Patrick Mahomes. I'm not taking Baker Mayfield. I'm not taking Bo Nix. I'm not taking Kyler Murray. Like if I'm that late in the draft, still looking for my first quarterback, I'm just going to wait a few more rounds and get someone who I view as comparable. And Kyler, again, I don't see the situation getting dramatically better next year. I think the Cardinals could pretty easily just repeat what they did this year. Unless they have some massive hits in the draft, which is asking a lot. I mean, they just brought in a 38-year-old defensive lineman. That's like one of your big additions this offseason is Calais Campbell, who I love, ex-Jaguar. But still, I'm also out on James Conner, and I think you're getting an appropriate discount, guy who actually had a pretty nice season last year, despite the Cardinals struggling, had 3 really big games at the end that I think kind of boosted his numbers relative to what he was doing in the middle of the year, but was just outside the top 10 in terms of running backs. You don't have to pay that kind of price, certainly, but Connor's one of those guys who obviously has had injury issues. You dodge those really until week 17 this past year. That feels like a best case scenario. I would have a tough time thinking that repeats. It's a little Anthony Davis-like in fantasy hoops where it's like, I think Davis played like 71 games last year and you're just like, all right, are you comfortable taking him 6 overall? Are you betting on that happening again? Connor's going into his age 30 season. We've gone multiple years now where it's felt like they've had other options. Last year it was Trey Benson. They never really turned things over to him. I'm not saying James Conner just loses this job, but I think this is the year that we could see a reduction in workload, some physical fall off as he reaches his 30s. So even at a reduced ADP, I'm not thrilled to be looking at James Conner right now, just inside pick 70.
I'm totally fine with James Conner, and here's the only reason why. I can just get Trey Benson a little bit later, and I'm very confident that the combo of James Conner and Trey Benson will be something like a top 12 fantasy running back. And in best ball, you're getting both. So you're getting just a top 12 backfield. The same sort of thought process applies for Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And on the aggregate, if you combine both of their price tags, it's about the same. But Kenneth Walker is going at least a round and a half earlier than James Conner. And in best balls, you kind of have to just hope everyone doesn't take Trey Benson or Zach Charbonnet, because otherwise the strategy then gets completely blown up. Like if you're saying I get a naked James Conner, pause, don't want to have that happen necessarily, but in best ball, if that scenario occurs, that makes me really, really uncomfortable. So then you have to prioritize taking Trey Benson, let's just say round 9, if his ADP is round 10. And that's a spot where I don't like pigeonholing myself into it. I want more experience doing best ball drafts this year and to see what the market would look like, what it would look like on DraftKings or Drafters or Underdog to necessarily do that sort of strategy. But I do feel comfortable saying the Cardinals backfield, whether it be Trey Benson or James Conner, will be about running back 12. Kyler Murray's a different spot though. And you've outlined something that I've felt entering 2025, or I guess the 2025 season, 2026, that I was going to be more comfortable doing. I want to draft a quarterback high. Like if we're doing the stake league auction draft, which is going to be all the conversation in 4 months, I'm going to have Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. I'm going to have a Josh Allen. Like I want to have one of those consequential quarterbacks. But what I saw in this early best balls that I've done thus far is they're going pretty high. I like a lot of these other running backs and receivers in the round 3, 4, 5 spot. And I guarantee you in redraft, it's the same conversation you're going to have to be having. So I might be more comfortable than I was entering this year taking a Baker Mayfield, who, yeah, there's absolutely no way he ends up producing to the level he did last year. But is he quarterback 10? I think close to it. I might take a Bo Nix, less so on Bo Nix, but more on Patrick Mahomes, who's going quarterback 7. Or I might even be fine going into the Caleb Williams, Jordan Love territory of quarterbacks. That's kind of where Kyler is. Like there is a safe rushing floor that Kyler Murray now post-injury, 2 years, knee injury, is going to be giving you that you can say I'm building a roster around. I don't know if there's an upside though. Like I don't think Kyler Murray can be quarterback 5. I don't think he can do a Bo Nix thing where he jumps from quarterback 22 to quarterback 7. And it might be that I just like 18 quarterbacks this year. And while there is going to be 4 or 5 that make a difference in best ball, finding quarterback 22 that becomes quarterback 10 becomes almost as important than getting Lamar Jackson in round 3.
Yeah. No, I think you summed that up really well. All right, Joe, we're running a little bit long here. I'm not going to cut it off yet, but I want to go kind of rapid fire through anyone else that you want to discuss here. So we'll start with Breece Hall.
Yeah, I like Breece Hall quite a bit. I still think he's one of the better running backs in the NFL. We talk about Jonathan Taylor and how if Daniel Jones is the quarterback, that makes that offense worse. I think Justin Fields is the quarterback for the Jets, and even if they draft somebody, that's going to make that offense as well worse too. So if we're looking at other running backs in that sort of range for Breece Hall, was a mid-3rd round pick, I would much rather consider Josh Jacobs. I would take Christian McCaffrey over Breece Hall. I'm taking Kyron Williams and Bucky Irving as well, and they're about a 6-pick difference to one of those best balls. James Cook's an interesting running back given his contract situation, but they're going to get opportunities for rushing touchdowns again in Buffalo. It's not just Josh Allen taking those. So Cook is probably one that I like. I think Breece Hall, if you were to go to a different team, instantly jumps higher, but I wouldn't be surprised if Breece Hall at the moment is one of those players that falls down in ADP.
Yeah, I actually like the price on James Cook, man. I know I feel like I took a lot of flack for taking a pretty decent amount of Cook last year, and I want pieces of elite offenses like that, man. Everybody we're scared away of Josh Allen running in every single touchdown, and there's room. There's room when you're scoring.
I liked Ray Davis too last year, and he didn't do nearly as much as I expected. So that's fair.
When he was out there, he looked good. All right, we got a couple questions in the chat, so we'll end with these. Actually, we'll start here with Michael. We got a super chat. Thank you, Michael. He says, how is Worthy's value affected by Rashee Rice?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those. We mentioned Jameson Williams for the Lions as a early 4th round receiver in best ball. I get it. Like the boom weeks are going to be really awesome. Yeah. Worthy feels like a safer version of it because there were times last season where, just like Rashee Rice in his rookie year, the Chiefs ramped up Xavier Worthy to be a crucial factor as a per target guy, like week 13 and onward. And that was kind of with the reintroduction of Hollywood Brown to that offense as well too. I have been completely out on Xavier Worthy, much the same way that I was with Devon Achane. You can't convince me that a 160-pound receiver in today's NFL is going to be able to gobble up 100+ targets. And those are typically guys I want in the first round. I'm sorry, in the top 50 overall drafted guys. Deshaun Jackson was always the best case scenario. Well, guess what, Nick? We saw Deshaun Jackson basically play out in the Super Bowl. I mean, like Xavier Worthy was easily the best offensive player for the Chiefs. He had been for a lot of that run up to the playoffs as well too. So I might be eating crow a little bit. I think once Rice comes back though, on a play-by-play basis what the defense is going to give you with Rashee Rice and what you can get with Rashee Rice, the talent. You do not know on a play-by-play basis with Xavier Worthy if you are the Chiefs and Andy Reid calling plays. And I think that's where I go to path of least resistance. Rice is going to get me more first downs than Xavier Worthy will, and I would rather have Rashee Rice. So I think actually he's dramatically affecting what Xavier Worthy is going to do. It's just, will Rashee Rice actually play the entire season? Because if not, that might open up enough wiggle room for Xavier Worthy to kind of find his place in best ball drafts.
We also haven't seen the Rice Worthy Hollywood trio at any point.
No,
I mean, we got a couple weeks worth of Rice and Worthy. We got, a decent sample at the end of the season of Hollywood and Worthy, but those three together, really not at all. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I will stand firm on Rashee Rice, barring any legal troubles. That might be something we have to clip and backtrack on at some point. All right, we'll finish out with this. How have we not talked any DeAndre Swift in this episode, Joe?
True.
Jamie says, what do you think about DeAndre Swift and his value in the 9th round in best ball? What if the Bears don't draft a running back in day 2?
They're going to draft a running back in day 2. So that's actually exactly why I'm fading DeAndre Swift in one of my pseudo keeper dynasty leagues. DeAndre Swift is about $33 running back that I dropped without any reason to drop him yet. You technically have 2 months to do so. That's like James Conner price tag of typical running back. Aaron Jones was around that same spot. I feel much better about Aaron Jones and James Conner. And obviously that's being reflected in the best ball ADP because those guys are going about 2 or 3 rounds higher. The Bears are going to draft 1, if not 2 running backs. 1, if not 2 in day 2, day 3 range. There are just too many guys. And the way that Ben Johnson likes to run this offense and what he's talked about thus far in different press conferences, they need to improve that backfield. Because even if DeAndre Swift is your highly paid running back 2, you're fine with that on a rookie contract, Caleb Williams. What you can't have happen is if Roschon Johnson is of consequential value to that team other than just a plotter or goal line guy. And I don't think they want to be in a spot right now to have that happen. The veteran running back market's already dried up. You can get a lot of value with a mid 3rd round running back and a mid 4th round running back. If they double tapped running back, I think the Bears will be in a completely fine spot and they're going to add to that. So no, I think DeAndre Swift will actually absolutely see talent added in day 2, if not day 3, early 2.
All right. Joseph, great stuff as always, man. We'll keep doing this throughout the NFL offseason. Glad to hear you will be on site at the NFL draft in Green Bay just a few weeks from now. I know you're going to be hosting our show Prop Points on VSiN later this week as well. So you could catch Joe and Alan Soslowski Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern over on the VSiN network. It's on YouTube TV. You can find it on the VSiN Watch app. So make sure you check that out. I'm sure that will be a football heavy show as we get into some NFL draft props. But Joe, enjoy the rest of the week, man, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.